Hi, my name is Christine Chase, and as de facto primary editor on this venture, I wanted to pop in and say a few words before our first episode. The Take 3 Theological Variety Hour is a joint project of 3 college friends reunited through the technological marvels of the 21st century, none of which know anything about podcasting, recording, editing, or posting to anything more complicated than Instagram. We didn't even know what to call this venture until after the second episode was recorded. Honestly, if you're hearing these words, it's a minor miracle. All of this is to say, this is all new to us. If you get the idea that we have no idea what we're doing, you're right. However, I invite you to join in our adventure as we find our way to eventual excellence. With that, I give you episode 1, Possession, Evil, and a Problem with Hollywood.
Oh, I forgot to light the dragon. Darn it. Totally random mom thought. Sorry. We have a Halloween dragon outside, and I'm the only one home to turn it on, and I didn't, so whatever. Carpe Halloween. So Possession. It's going to be Halloween in a few days, and I think it was an appropriate time to bring up questions on possession. Now, Christine, you have this really nice shelf behind you there. If things start flying off, we can call somebody.
Where did Christine go?
Huh?
I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to talk and not worry about the video.
Yeah, because we're just, this is going to be an audio thing. I think that was our agreement.
Well, Shanna just sent me an article that says, according to this research that was done by, who did it?
Colonel Mustard in the library with the candlestick.
The Spiritual Science Research Foundation.
Oh, that sounds legit.
Has done a study and has realized that 85% of people who experience homosexuality, it's because of quote unquote mainly ghosts.
Mainly.
According to this pie chart, 85% of the root causes of homosexuality are mainly ghosts. The other 10% is psychological, and then 5% is physical hormonal changes. But spiritual, 85%, quote unquote, mainly ghosts.
Okay. All right. So I think before we really get into the discussion, considering that this is our first attempt at a podcast, because for any potential listeners, we have no idea what we're doing at all.
Yeah, true.
But I was thinking,
I can't even see you.
Thankfully, it's all going to be audio.
Okay.
But I was thinking it might perhaps be wise for each of us to introduce ourselves and a bit of our relative backgrounds and a bit about perhaps the overall thrust and direction of what this podcast will be about, so that people who aren't interested in theology at all can go, next.
Yeah.
I suggest this.
Okay.
So should
I'm all for it. You start.
I will go first. So I am Christine Chase. I am, of the 3 of us, I am the one who is not a theologian. My bachelor's degree was in music education, which is a terribly safe degree until you decide that the school system is full of crap and you want nothing to do with it. And so you end up getting a job writing contracts for the Army. I'm also a published science fiction author. also do a lot of artwork and music. That being said, I have a lot of theological interests, and theological expanded to include things like metaphysics and various types of esotericism. So that's my background. That's what I bring to this.
You're an esoterrorist?
Yes. Yes. Esoterrorist is a good word because I hate all of them.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. Next.
Go ahead, Erica.
You go.
No.
Yes.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Right. I'm Seth Alexander, and I have a doctorate in theology and constructive theology.
And he's a Virgo.
And I'm a Virgo. And what else about me? Oh, my research is in women mystics, specifically medieval and pre-modern women mystics. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. Well, no, my dissertation was on Hadavik and Beatrice of Nazareth. And right now I make coffee. But Erica and I both are published as of this month in a collection of essays on Mary Magdalene. So
hey, we're published in 2 languages. Get it straight, buddy.
I know, it's the same article, though.
It doesn't matter. It's still 2 different languages now, isn't it? It's not the same book.
Yeah. So that's me.
Okay. So that leaves me.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Erica. And yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is I'm a mom of 2, and 2 very important little people to me. So one is 8, and the other one is 3.5, and the 3.5-year-old is currently 6. So if you hear yelling or screaming or Armageddon in my house, that would be him waking up. I am working on my doctorate, and I'm trying to finish it, but that's a little bit of a challenge, but I'll get to that, I'm sure, sometime in this podcast. But I started out in not doing ethics and philosophy, and then I ended up in ethics and philosophy. Originally, I did a little bit more along the lines of what Seth does with medieval theology, and I like arguing too much, so ethics was a little bit more natural for me, and I had a really good ethics professor. So I focus mostly on family ethics in Catholicism, specifically dealing with children, and that's what my dissertation is on how we treat children as objects, and that becomes very dangerous for them as they're trying to grow up. But I also, I've written on Mary Magdalene. I've done a lot of women in religion. I do business ethics, which I didn't think I would like so much, but I do like teaching business ethics. And I started out doing really sexual ethics with infertility and crossover with medical ethics. So basically, if it's Catholic in its ethics, I am somewhere in it, except political ethics. I don't do political ethics. I'll talk a little bit about it, but I really don't care about it. It's just not my jam. I leave that to other people because they seem to be very interested in it. So I'm a little bit more of a humanist. Yeah, I play the cello. I used to play the cello. I don't know. Do I still play the cello? I guess I could be considered still a cellist.
If you pull it out tomorrow and play it a bit before we get this posted, then yes, you still play the cello.
I did promise Alice's teacher that I would play and bring my cello for the 2nd graders. So I suppose I have to be considered a cellist. And I like doing crafting and arts and, journal, all that stuff. And I've known these two for a very long time.
I was just about to say, we should mention
Oh,
early
yeah.
on that how we know each other is we were basically college besties. I was the only music student who didn't hang out with exclusively other music students. I always gravitated to the classics and theology majors because you all were a lot more interesting.
Nicer?
Yeah, generally. You had better conversations because everyone in the vocal department was always would only talk about opera. And I do enjoy speaking about opera, but only so much.
What
And
was
then
Glenn's major?
Hmm?
Was
History.
Glenn a classics major?
Classics and history.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So yeah, I was the only person in the music department who didn't actually really know everyone else in the music department.
Yeah.
Because my favorite night of college, the favorite time of hanging out with you guys was a Friday night when we all brought passages from our favorite medieval mystics and cracked open a bottle of wine and passed the bottle of wine around while reading passages from our favorite mystics. And mine, I remember I chose Bernard of Clairvaux, and I read from one of his sermons regarding the choirs of angels, because angels are very much what I've been into for a long time. So I don't know if you guys remember that, or if you had so many of those evenings while I wasn't around that you can't remember which one it was. But
my memories of that point in time.
Fair enough. I was the sober one a lot.
Was that the night that Erica and I fell asleep on that guy's porch?
No, that was
this
Roxanne's
your
Bacchanalia.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. I remember that too, though.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember either. But no.
Anyway, so
You don't remember the porch night?
I remember the porch. I remember reading Mystics too, but I don't remember what anyone else read except Christine and me.
I don't remember what I read either. I don't know that I picked a mystic.
I think I picked Marguerite Perret.
That sounds right. That sounds about right. I don't remember what you read from her, but I remember reading Bernard because that's one of my favorite descriptions of the choirs of angels that has ever been written.
I'm trying to think of who I would have picked at that point in time. Maybe Joan of Arc. I don't know.
Oh, but she didn't do much writing.
I don't know. That's interesting. I have. Maybe I can look back and try and figure out. Probably somebody we were reading. So
yeah.
I don't know. Jan's loved the Malleus Maleficarum. Maybe I just picked a passage out of that.
Oh, I just found
a good
a
read.
copy of that.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I have mine somewhere. For those listening that don't know, the Malleus Maleficarum is the hammer of the witches from the medieval era. It's a good read. You should pick it up.
It's good. It's good.
Let's kill all the witches. Yay.
I mean, looking what has happened to our society since we stopped burning witches, an argument could be made.
I think we're burning the wrong witches.
But we're not burning any right now, so...
Like, we're not physically burning witches. Do you want to go back to physically burning people?
It depends on the day. It depends on what I've just been reading. Because there are some people... There are some people I would say absolutely yes to.
Well, before I've had lunch at the coffee house, I definitely want to burn people. But as far as burning witches goes, I think that's probably problematic.
Oh, what happened at the coffee house? I need to know. Sorry, we're just
Today?
Yes.
Oh, I just had like the never-ending turnover.
Do you think people were possessed?
No. Well, I told you the other day, I'm not sure about possession anymore. Although, actually, after we talked about it, I feel better about it.
Wait.
Christine's
Yes,
like,
I make
wait,
people
what?
feel better about possession.
Yes.
No, no, I mean,
Get yours today.
Seth,
well,
don't
now
worry.
that
I
I
think you're
know about the
possessed.
ghosts, then I guess we're all set. But no, because I've been reading especially about the possession at Loudun and how it was pretty much a big spectacle and a big fake. And then I was also reading about the story that the movie The Exorcist is based on. There's all these people. So I read the diary that was kept by the priest who did the exorcism, and then I started reading like stuff on the internet, which I should know better than doing that. But I mean, doing that without like having a critical eye at it. And people were saying, "Oh, the diary is faked." But then I was like, I remember because we did
knew
some
Mike.
research. Yeah, well, right. So like anyone, yeah. So any
Mike knew the
Jesuit,
priest.
every
Yes.
Jesuit in the world has like a 6 degrees of separation with the exorcist priest. So it's like, so yeah, I just sort of got caught up in like the way, and I think that this does happen a lot, the way that it's like the phenomenon of possession is taken up to be used as a tool for other things, like it was at Loudun.
Was that one the one that the Devils was based on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. What was Le Pacte de Loup? What was that one based on? I know that had a historic. I'll look it up. Never mind.
Oh, that's based on the Beast of Gévaudan.
Oh, yes. Okay. Not exorcism, people, not
No
possession, a beast.
possession at all.
A beast, a horrible, monstrous beast.
So what was the story of this one that you're talking about that was fake, Seth? Because I've not heard of this.
So there's a book in English by what's his name? Aldous
Certeau?
Huxley.
Oh.
Called The Devils of Loudun. It's based on a 17th century case in France where this convent of Ursuline nuns was supposedly possessed. And it was sort of like a crossover case because the priest who the nuns ultimately implicated in being practicing witchcraft and causing their possession was tried for sorcery and burned at the stake. So I was actually just reading another thing about it, and it sort of like ties in with the witch trials and male witches versus female witches, but kind of how the witch trials
warlocks
ended, and then sort of these possession narratives kind of become more popular. So I'm still reading that. It's a book by Michel de Certeau, and it's really kind of dense. But anyway, the long and the short of it is this woman, Jeanne des Anges, who was like the superior of the Ursuline convent, pretty much, I mean, it seems like she faked the whole thing, and it was sort of like a case of mass hysteria with these mostly like 17 to 25-year-old sisters who were cloistered. So, and then after the whole, so the possession became like this public spectacle, and people would like go to watch them do the exorcisms and like serve snacks while they were viewing the exorcism. So it
became a tourist trap?
Yeah, it became like a money-making scheme. And then Jeanne des Anges, after she was supposedly freed of the demons, went on this like speaking tour around France.
Oh, that's how you always know a fraud.
Yeah, so it seems like it was like totally, just a big show. And I'm sure some people, like I'm sure the exorcists believed that it was, what it was, but I just think that like that case is particularly troubling as far as this stuff goes, because I was also reading. Sorry, my thoughts are not linear at all. I was also reading there's actually a page on the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops webpage about exorcism. So there's like a frequently asked questions page. So the bishops say, which is, Catholic teaching, that there is an evil entity, and that entity does take possession of people, and those people are in need of special ritual to be freed from that situation. But I think it's very rare, and I think now in the 21st century especially, we need to be, and the bishops say this too, is that we have to be very careful about mental illness and other things that can manifest in ways that seem like what people would believe is possession, but it's actually mental illness. And historically, I think that that's been the case, is that people had mental illnesses and they were, subjected to exorcism, which may have made it even worse. So
there's that. But okay, so to bring in a different point of view, for the sake of argument, at the very least. So I think we can add, words escape me one moment. I think that we can all agree that it is very important to not misdiagnose what is a mental or emotional illness as a possession, but I would say there is, would you think there might also be the risk going the other way, that there's the risk of assuming that, just automatically assuming that everything that presents has to be a psychological illness, and claiming that something's a psychological illness when there's something more spiritual going on?
Well, that's definitely, at least in the film, I've never read the book, The Exorcist, but in the film, that's sort of what happens. They diagnose Reagan or they put her through all these physical and psychological tests, but that's not in the film narrative. That's not what she's dealing with. So it doesn't help her. I actually just watched this background of that movie, and there's this Canadian scientist who says that all quote-unquote possessions can be, kind of reduced to this kind of brain chemistry, and he has this like helmet that he puts on people and blasts them with some kind of like, I don't know.
I mean, any materialist heathen will reduce everything to materialist heathenry.
Right. Yeah. So I think anytime you reduce anything to,
any one thing,
anything, then you're probably missing out on something.
Concur.
But yeah. I've actually been reading a lot about this lately. I don't know why. It just sort of happened. But
because it's October.
Well, that's true. So I have a lot of thoughts that are, as you can tell, very disjointed. But
I mean, that's fair enough. I think all of us, while we're in the middle of working something out for ourselves, everything is disjointed until it all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling Erica as we were setting up earlier, there's a TV show that my father and I are now watching, and it's on CBS. And I don't know what night it's on because he DVRs it, and it's called Evil. And it stars, where's the cast? So Mike Coulter, who was the guy who played Luke Cage in the Netflix Luke Cage adaptation. Also Michael Emerson, who played Finch in Person of Interest. And basically it's about the little snippet they give on IMDb is a skeptical female clinical psychologist joins a priest in training and a blue-collar contractor as they investigate supposed miracles, demonic possession, and other extraordinary occurrences to see if there's a scientific explanation or if something truly supernatural is at work. The show is called Evil. It's on CBS, and it is really quite good, at least so far. I missed the pilot, but I've seen episodes 2 through 5 so far.
Yeah, that sounds good.
When you're watching it, if you know the sort of Catholic lore regarding demons and possession, the writers at least have obviously done their research. And It looks like they're taking some original tacks in the storytelling and how they're progressing the overall arc, at least of the first season. So I really appreciate that. Because you can only, there's a tendency in Hollywood to always go the same route, one of the same 2 or 3 routes where demons are concerned.
Right.
And it looks like they're choosing something other than those main routes. So I would, if you get a chance to check that out, I would.
I'll be part of my research.
Recommend it.
What'd you say it's called? Evil?
Evil.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, my dad and I started watching it because it had Luke Cage and the guy from Person of Interest, and we're fans.
Okay.
But it turned out, to actually be decently written. And I'm not gonna lie, like I'm braced for disappointment just because Hollywood has no idea how to deal, for the most part, with supernatural realities.
Right.
Because most of the people who do the writing and the directing and the producing are atheists.
Oh my God, this show looks scary.
There's definitely some scary moments and some creepy moments.
I'm just looking at the still photos as we're talking. Cool. Well, I feel like a lot of, I usually don't watch quote unquote possession movies. I mean, I think The Exorcist is an excellent movie.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of movies that try to imitate that. But they're all pretty terrible, really. And they're very, Hollywoodized, and they don't have a lot of basis in any of the, material that's out there. So.
Well, I think that Hollywood does much like that story of the Ursuline convent. They go for the spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't.
Aspect.
They don't go to the substance behind what possession actually is.
Right.
And the real terror behind possession. And the supernatural realities. And in the same vein, they also gleefully overlook the forces of good, as it were. They just want sort of despair porn.
Right.
Instead of, yes, there is evil, yes, it is supernatural and sapient, and it desires your destruction, but hey, there's good news. There are all these forces also that want to help you and want to protect you. And that's where the problem of the disbelief of the writers and the showrunners or the producers and directing staff comes out, is they live in a sort of nihilistic world. Mm-hmm. And so even when they can't imagine anything really other than, well, if there's supernatural evil, then we're doomed. They're all like an H.P. Lovecraft character looking into the abyss and gibbering in horror.
Right. And that's what sells. That's what people, it's like people always want to read Dante's Inferno, but they don't care by the time they get to Paradise. They're like, oh, boring.
Yeah, because the adrenaline punch is in the fear and the terror, but that's only because you live such a, if you will, soft and bourgeois lifestyle that you're just in it for the thrills.
Yeah.
Because nothing truly, it's your only experience of fear and adrenaline. Whereas if you do live a harder life, you realize that it can't just be nihilism. It can't just be fear and despair all the time.
Right.
Which is why, honestly, George R.R. Martin lost me so early in his writing.
I've never read any of him.
It's just awful people being awful, doing awful things all the time. And the only good guy, the first thing that happens in the books is the only good guy gets killed because he's also an idiot. He's so good, he's stupid. And the rest of everyone else is just basically terrible. Doing terrible things with a never-ending supply of peasants to rape and to murder. So, but again, that comes from that nihilistic worldview of everything's always despair, everything's always, fear. There is no countering force of goodness.
Right. That's interesting that you say that, because that makes me think of another thing. Like, usually in these movies, like these supernatural movies, like priests and religious are always depicted as, not always, but a lot of the time they're depicted as these sort of like naive.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really, they're so good, and they, like being good and holy is equal to being sort of a little bit stupid, I guess.
Yes. You see that.
Definitely. I mean, anyone who's hung out with any nuns know that they are ass kickers. They're not. They don't mess around,
And again, that really comes down to the overall generalized nihilism of the writers, that if you do believe in goodwill, it's because you're naive and you're innocent and you haven't confronted the evil of the world. But when you do, you'll be jaded and dulled just like us.
Yeah.
That it's unrealistic to believe in goodness. One of my favorite TV shows, which I haven't watched in seasons, but at least for a long while was quite good, but I still had this beef with, was Supernatural, where it's first you have the demons, okay, they're demonic, but then the angels show up, and with the exception of like one or two, and eventually I guess three, if you count Samandriel, they're all assholes.
Oh, yeah.
They're all complete jerks. And God is a bumbling idiot who, before you realize who he is, when he's just the author, he's drunk half the time.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I love the show is carried by the strength of the main characters and the acting that Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles and eventually Misha Collins give. But the writing that's still so typical of the good guys, if you are good and you are, focused on goodness and purity and holiness, you don't last long, or you don't stay that way for long. I will say a wonderful exception to that trend was Netflix's Daredevil adaptation.
Oh, yeah.
Which, I mean, that's a gritty show, very violent. But in the end, you still have characters who believe in God and believe in goodness and want to do the right thing. And yes, they fail in that a lot, but they're still trying, and they still believe that it's worth the effort. And that's a far cry, I think, from where I would like some things to be in Hollywood, but that's really, it still breaks the mold that way.
Yeah.
In many ways. So there's that against the nihilism that pervades Hollywood. But yeah, that's why a lot of Hollywood versions of possession, they all want the devil, but they can't deal with Saint Michael.
Right.
And if they do, he's a jerk.
Yeah, he doesn't even show up usually.
Yes, except one exception. An otherwise terrible film called Legion, but Paul Bettany's Saint Michael was on point. So good.
Oh, did I see that? No, I don't think I did.
It's weird. It suffers from a lot of the. It's like you had multiple writers, and you had like, I don't know how many writers they had on that, but I'm fairly certain they were split between mostly nihilists and one guy who was like, no, there still has to be goodness, and don't fuck with Saint Michael. And that was pretty. Paul Bettany did a good job. I'll just put it that way. The rest of the movie was not so good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those movies. Erica and I were watching a lot of those movies for a while because we were kind of trying to do some. I mean, we did a bit of research on like apocalypticism and popular media, and we did a couple presentations on that HBO show Carnival, which has a lot of really like apocalyptic themes. So we were watching a lot of those movies, like oh God, that one that Arnold Schwarzenegger is in. Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are really terrible.
Yes.
So, but they do. I mean, I guess they have their moments. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier I was reading the diary that the priest who performed the actual exorcism that the book and the film The Exorcist was based on. I was reading his diary, and something that does not appear in the film that I thought was really interesting is that when the boy, because in the real case it was a boy, not a girl, when he was finally freed from the possession of the evil spirit that was in him, or spirits, he actually, the Archangel Michael spoke through him and said that they were gone, that the evil was gone.
I remember reading that.
So I thought that was really interesting because I'd never heard that before. And in all of my research, but I'd never read the diary before either. So
yeah, I don't know if it was the diary that I read or a book about the occurrence that maybe they talked with the priest, and so that detail made it in there too.
Yeah.
But I remember that, and I was like, yes,
that's another interesting like aspect about possession, is that like throughout, sort of history or Christian history, there's instances where, obviously instances in the Bible and everywhere where people are possessed by evil spirits, but there's also this, these instances where, I don't know if you would say possessed, but where these people are kind of overtaken by good spirits or saints. So like in the case of Joan of Arc, I mean, she heard the saints speaking to her, and
I would say that's usually a different sort of thing, because it's you'll have people influenced or by when it's the good spirits, whether angels or saints, they'll hear their voices, they'll get instructions, they'll see apparitions, but the free will and the volition of the person is never violated.
Right.
And then that's sort of one of the distinguishing traits of how do you tell a good spirit from an evil spirit? Well, the good spirit will never mess around with your free will, whereas the evil spirit, that's what they're after, one way or another. But yeah, you do have this countervailing in especially in Catholic lore, and I'm certain if we looked into Eastern Orthodox, we'd find a fair amount there too, because they tend to be, from what I've seen, they're better about general mystical experiences overall than the Catholic Church. But you do have these countering forces, and one of my favorite books of the Bible that we Catholics get, yay, is the Book of Tobit, which specifically tells the story of, one of the main parts of the story is the Archangel Raphael taking the demon Asmodeus out to the desert and whooping his ass. And it's quite, even reading reading the book, it's quite almost cinematic. The way that happens, and so we have that as part of the lore, that yes, there is evil, and honestly, there's never been a point in my life where I've doubted the existence of supernatural evil and its desire to destroy. But if there is such evil, there's that countering of God and God's angels coming to help and protect if you allow them to.
Right. Yeah, that's something that Erica was kind of saying when we were sort of preparing for this episode, is that, if you have one, you have the other. We used to have, I guess you never met him. Yeah, because he was in Chicago, but we had a colleague who was a priest in the grad program at Chicago, and he was all about, the Blessed Mother and saints and everything. But if you started talking about any kind of personified evil, he didn't want to talk about that. And it's sort of well, how can you, be all about one side of it, but not even want to believe in the other side of it?
And to me, that is where the naivete comes in.
Yeah.
Of we will focus on only the bright, happy, cheerful parts of the faith, but not recognize that the reason they are bright and cheerful, the reason why they are remembered, and this huge body of lore assembled over thousands of years, is because of the evil. To give us, we read the stories of the saints, and we read the records of the apparitions, and again and again and again we have the various saints who are tormented by demons. The closer they get to God, the more intense the spiritual persecution.
Right.
We have in various apparitions, the Blessed Mother saying straight out, there's this evil, and it is, it's infesting, and it's getting in, and no one's paying attention, and you all need to wake up and start paying attention because it's real. So I can understand the people who say, I don't want to get into demonology, because that's wisdom. You don't really want to get into demonology, but you have to, ignoring the fact of spiritual evil is letting it run rampant, really.
Yeah.
At least from my point of view. Because you can't fight or stop something if you refuse to acknowledge that it even exists.
Right, exactly. Well, it's just like, dropping everything in science and, jettisoning all the humanities out of a college program. It's like you lose something when you neglect those sort of spiritual and human parts of us. Hold on one second, okay, Christine?
Sure.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Boys are getting restless. It's almost their dinner time.
Well, fair enough. So I don't, considering we actually had a gap in the middle of this attempt between Erica signing off to take care of her munchkin and me remembering, oh, someone needs to record now. We'll see if we can edit together something that can work. And if not, then this has been an excellent test run.
Yeah.
Getting you on, at least getting you up and running. And we can try to work it out better in the future, or try to cobble something together here and post it up as our very less than competent first attempt.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time. So
yeah.
Cool. Looks like, have we been recording for almost an hour?
Almost, because I'm at like 21 and a half minutes, and Erica had fair. I don't see how long hers was. She sent me a copy of the recording she had. So I'll be basically sending her what I recorded, and then each of us will work on editing, I think, and then we'll go from there. And we'll be definitely, if we can salvage something from our cutting room floors, then we'll definitely be putting it up as a podcast, and then I might also take the audio and just slap a sort of generic image up and put it up on YouTube.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So that's
cool.
All right. So I will talk to you soon.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.